joining us now live. Dave, give us a sense where you are in Brussels about what is happening and what the possibilities are going forward.
Well, obviously, these developments are being watched very, very closely in the building behind me at the European Commission because the EU has been waiting for this day for a very long time. Even just yesterday, Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign affairs chief, met with relatives of the hostages in Brussels and said afterwards, again, reiterating the EU's call for all of the hostages to be let go unconditionally. The key thing here is that there will be conditions on this hostage release, and that opens questions about whether this deal is going to be acceptable to the more right-wing elements in Benjamin Netanyahu's government. So we're waiting for the kind of very official reactions from EU governments and at Brussels level for the EU, but certainly talking to people here, there is a lot of enthusiasm for this, and I think that there wants to be a very demonstrated enthusiasm for this because they want to make sure that this actually happens. But there are open questions. So, of course, we heard in that press conference before the main outlines of how this is going to work. One open question is obviously someone's going to have to enforce this peace deal, and that will require peacekeepers. There's been a lot of talk that Arab countries should be putting together that peacekeeping force, but could EU countries, EU troops have a role there? They, of course, have had that in the past. Then there's the question about the humanitarian aid that's really supposed to be turbocharged into Gaza under this deal. The EU has been providing a lot of that humanitarian aid, and so the EU is going to have to work very, very closely with its partners in the region in order to get that aid flowing, in order to meet those conditions of the deal. And then finally, of course, there is the question of what comes next and the two-state solution, which at least implicitly is implied in this deal that has to really get back on track. And of course, just on a practical level, work toward a two-state solution is going to have to move forward in order to make sure that Hamas doesn't reconstitute itself in Gaza. So there's a lot of open questions here in Brussels, and I think that they're eager to get more detail on exactly what the plan is, particularly in the next 3 days with this humanitarian aid.
Dave, how quickly can the EU swoop, in a sense, either in terms of peacekeeping, but more importantly, I suppose, in terms of humanitarian aid? How prepared, how ready is the EU to act on that?
Yeah, Mark, sorry, the audio's cutting out a bit, but I think the big issue that the EU is going to have to be working with here is that opinions on this conflict are very divided between EU member states. And of course, we're going to have to navigate a way forward here for the EU showing its full support for this deal. But there are those, even just earlier tonight, we had a statement from the far left group in the European Parliament welcoming the deal, but also saying that Netanyahu needs to be prosecuted as a war criminal. And so that's going to be very tricky, I think, between the different EU governments, how they deal with this question of how to handle certainly the ICC arrest warrant and the Netanyahu government, Netanyahu himself, assuming he stays in place after this, how they're going to handle that going forward and how they're going to handle relations with Israel.
Dave Keating, thank you very much indeed, as ever, throwing lights onto every subject for us from Brussels, but clearly in this particular moment, really bringing to light for us the issues that Brussels is facing regarding what's happening in the Middle East. Those issues, peacekeeping, possibly bringing in humanitarian aid. Will